After 22 years of marriage, I thought I knew my wife the way a man knows. The house he built with his own hands. Every beam, every angle, every imperfection he chose to live with. Anyway. Then my 12-year-old daughter said something at dinner one Tuesday evening in October, and everything I believed was solid came apart at every joint. We were eating pasta at the kitchen table. My daughter was supposed to be telling me about her history project, something about Pacific Northwest settlements, fur traders, the usual middle school territory. But she looked up from her plate with that guileless directness children still have, before they learn that some questions change things permanently. "Dad," she said, twirling her fork, "is Mr. Rafferty still your friend? Because I saw his name on Mom's phone like 4 or 5 times today." It kept buzzing. My wife set down her water glass. Just set it down carefully, without a word. I kept my face neutral. "Where'd you see that, sweetheart?" Mom left her phone. A phone on the counter. When she went to get the mail, I wasn't trying to look, it just kept going off. "People text a lot for work," my wife said, her voice smooth and even. "Mr. Rafferty and I have a mutual client. Interior stuff. Nothing interesting." My daughter accepted that and went back to the fur traders. My wife refilled her water and smiled faintly at something on her plate. I ate the rest of my dinner and said nothing. But I heard the slight change in my wife's breathing. The fraction of a second before she answered. The way she held the glass with both hands afterward, like she needed something to hold on to. I've spent 26 years as an architect. I've been trained to notice what doesn't fit, what's load-bearing, and what isn't. What looks solid from the outside, but has been quietly compromised underneath. My name doesn't matter much to this story. My daughter calls me Dad. That's the identity that mattered to me that night and every night that followed. I'm 51 years old, principal at my own firm, Aldgate Design, in Portland, Oregon. We do institutional work, schools, civic buildings, the kind of structures that are supposed to outlast everyone who built them. This year we were competing for the largest commission we'd ever pursued. A new performing arts center in downtown Portland. My wife has her own practice, residential interiors, high-end renovation clients. For 22 years, I thought we were the kind of couple who had grown into something stronger than what we started with. A daughter. A craftsman house in the Selwood neighborhood with a garden she tends herself. A life that looked, from any angle, exactly like what it was. Blaine Rafferty was my business partner for 11 years. We built Aldgate together. His vision, my technical precision, that was the pitch we made to clients in the early days. And it wasn't entirely wrong. But somewhere in year 9, 10, 11, the gap between his instincts and his follow-through became impossible to paper over. Projects over budget. Deadlines missed. One nearly took down everything I'd spent a decade building. I bought him out 2 years ago. It was fair. My attorney made sure of that. And I made sure it wasn't brutal, because we'd been friends for 16 years before we were partners. We shook hands. I thought we were done. What I didn't know, what I sat at that dinner not yet knowing, was that Blaine had spent the 18 months since our separation building a new firm, specifically to compete for the same performing arts commission. And, at some point during those 18 months, he had found a way into my house. That Tuesday night, after my daughter went to bed, my wife told me her laptop had been running slow for a week. Could I take it to the office tomorrow? Have someone look at it? I said of course. She kissed me on the cheek and went upstairs. I sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open in front of me. I was only going to check the startup programs, clear some cache, 10 minutes. But her email client was open, and the name in the preview pane, the sender on the most recent thread, was his. I want to be precise about what I did next, because I've thought about it many times since. I didn't read the emails immediately. I sat with my hands flat on the table for what might have been 2 full minutes, just looking at his name on the screen. Then I read all 41 messages in that thread. Some of what I found was personal in the way that makes your chest feel like something is being slowly compressed inside it. The pet names, the references to specific afternoons. A weekend in September that my wife had told me was a client retreat in Bend. But what stopped me cold, what shifted something in my understanding from personal injury to something colder, and more controlled, were 6 attachments buried in the middle of the thread. 6 PDF files sent from my wife's email to his. 3 of them were early-stage design concepts from our performing arts proposal. Preliminary drawings, spatial diagrams, the kind of proprietary work product that every architecture firm treats as its most protected asset. She had photographed our documents, or accessed them through me somehow. I couldn't yet be certain. And she had sent them to the man competing directly against us for the most important contract of our firm's existence. I closed the laptop. I went to the window over the kitchen sink and looked out at the garden she tends so carefully. I stood there for a long time. Here is what I know about myself. I don't act when I'm angry. I learned that in my 30s, after a confrontation with a contractor that nearly ended in a lawsuit and cost me a relationship I valued. Since then, I've made it a practice to separate the moment I feel something from the moment I respond to it. The feeling is real. The response requires preparation. I went to bed. I lay in the dark next to my wife and listened to her breathe. She fell asleep before I did. I did not sleep. In the morning, I made my daughter's lunch, dropped her at school, and drove to the office. I called my business attorney before 9. I told him what I'd found. He was quiet. For a moment. Then he said, "Don't touch anything else on that laptop. I'll walk you through what we need." That afternoon, I returned the laptop to my wife and told her I'd had someone clean up the startup files. She thanked me and set it on the counter. And I watched her face for anything, guilt, relief, awareness, and found nothing. She was, by then, very practiced. Over the next 6 days, I moved through our life like a man doing structural assessment on a building he already knows has to come down. I documented everything I'd seen. I let my attorney pull the email records through proper channels. I confirmed through a colleague in the industry that Blaine had presented preliminary concepts to the Performing Arts Committee. Concepts that shared specific spatial organizing principles with work my firm had been developing privately for 8 months. On the 7th day, I received a message from an unknown number. "You deserve to know the full picture. The Friday night showcase in the Pearl District, he'll have her there. She's attended every planning meeting. Ask yourself how he knew your load-bearing concept for the North Wing corridor." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I called the number back. 4 rings, then voicemail. A woman's voice, professional and guarded. "You've reached Celia. Leave a message." I recognized the name. Celia Oakes had been Blaine's executive assistant for 6 years, until he let her go 3 months after our partnership dissolved. Terminated without severance, her professional references quietly blocked across our industry circles. I'd heard about it secondhand at the time and thought it was poorly handled. I hadn't known how poorly until now. I called her back the next morning. She answered on the second ring. "I wasn't sure you'd call back," she said. "Why did you wait this long to reach out?" A pause. "I didn't know about your wife until 2 months ago. I found out by accident. I ran into someone who'd seen them together at an event. I needed time to decide what to do with it." "Why do anything?" "Because what he did to me was wrong," she said, without any heat in it. "And what he's doing to you is worse. He's been using information from your firm for months. Your wife gave him access. I have records. Things he said in my presence when he assumed I wasn't paying attention. I kept notes because I knew eventually I'd need them." She sent me everything that evening. It was methodical, time-stamped, specific. Celia Oakes had spent 2 years quietly building a case she assumed she might one day need. The showcase was that Friday. Blaine's firm was presenting its performing arts proposal to a small group of civic leaders at a gallery space in the Pearl District, a preview event, invitation only. I wasn't invited. I found out through what Celia sent. Thursday evening, I spent with my daughter. We made soup from scratch, the 2 of us, because she'd been asking to learn how to do it properly. While we cooked, she talked about her friend group and a boy in her class who was, she informed me gravely, actually kind of tolerable. I listened and laughed in the right places and tried to memorize the way she looked standing at the counter in her socks, steam rising from the pot. At some point, she glanced over and said, "You seem far away tonight, Dad." "Just thinking about work," I said. "Is it the big project?" Yeah, you're going to get it, she said, with the uncomplicated certainty of a 12-year-old who has never had a reason to doubt her father. You always figure it out. I stirred the soup and said nothing for a moment. I hope so, sweetheart. She went back to chopping celery, and I stood there holding a wooden spoon, feeling the full weight of what I hadn't told her yet, and what I was about to do. Friday evening I drove to the Pearl District, alone. I wore the gray suit I keep for client presentations. I carried a leather portfolio containing, among other things, a USB drive with document metadata, showing the creation dates of my firm's proprietary design files, dates that predated Blaine's proposal concepts by months. My attorney knew where I was going. The gallery was warm, softly lit, the kind of venue designed to make everything inside it look important. I walked in without announcing myself. 30 or so people scattered across the room, wine glasses in hand, studying large format presentation boards mounted along the walls. I saw Blaine first. He was at the far end of the room, holding court in front of the north wing elevation. He'd put on weight since I'd last seen him, and was wearing a jacket I recognized. We'd bought them at the same store, the same year, on a trip to Chicago for a conference. He didn't see me come in. I saw my wife second. She was standing near the window with a glass of white wine, talking to a woman I didn't recognize. She was wearing a dress I'd never seen before. Her hair was down. She looked relaxed in the way people look when they believe they're somewhere. No one who knows them will appear. She saw me at the same moment I saw her. The color left her face so completely and so quickly that the woman beside her actually reached out and touched her arm. I didn't go to her. I walked to the presentation wall and stood in front of the largest board, a spatial diagram of the North Wing's central gathering corridor, and I looked at it for a long time. Long enough for Blaine to notice me. Long enough for several other people in the room to notice me noticing. He came over with his public face on, the outstretched hand. I didn't know you were coming, he said. I wasn't invited, I said. I didn't take his hand. He let it drop. Then maybe you should. This organizing concept, I said, gesturing at the board. The offset corridor structure, with the acoustic buffer, integrated into the wall cavity. Would you like to explain to these people where that came from? A few nearby conversations had gone quiet. That's our original work, he said. His voice stayed even. He was, I'll grant him, very good at staying even. I have the metadata from the files your source sent you, I said. My attorney has copies. The files were created in my firm's system 8 months ago. 6 months before you incorporated your new practice. You can contest that in whatever venue you like. But I'd suggest that a room full of people making decisions about a public commission is not the ideal place to start. The silence had spread across the whole gallery. My wife had moved toward us. I could see her in my peripheral vision, frozen 6 feet away, not close enough to intervene, and not far enough to pretend she hadn't heard. Blaine's composure broke. Not dramatically. He wasn't the kind of man who broke dramatically. It was smaller than that, a tightening around the jaw. A glance toward my wife that lasted exactly 1 second too long. That 1 second was everything. Several people in the room saw it. A couple of the civic leaders, I would learn later, had been quietly skeptical of his proposal to begin with. The questions that followed me out of that gallery moved faster than I did. I stopped at the door and turned back, to the room more than to him. I hope this city gets the center it deserves, I said. Just not designed by someone who built his proposal on stolen work. I walked out into the November air and stood on the sidewalk. My wife found me there 2 minutes later. How did you? She stopped, started again. How long have you known? 10 days, I said. I've been preparing. She was shaking. Or maybe she was cold. This isn't what you think. I read 41 emails, I said quietly, because the street wasn't empty. I know exactly what this is. She started to cry. I watched her and felt something that wasn't quite what I expected. Not rage, not the satisfaction I might have imagined, just an enormous, exhausted sadness. Like looking at a structural failure you saw coming for a long time and still couldn't prevent. 22 years, I said. She flinched. I know. Did you think about our daughter? Any of it? She didn't answer that. My attorney will contact you Monday, I said. There are going to be two separate proceedings, the divorce and the intellectual property matter. You were the source of the disclosure, which means your exposure isn't small. I'd suggest you retain someone quickly. She reached out and touched my arm. I stepped back, not angrily, just back. I'm not going to destroy you, I said. I'm not going to make this uglier than it has to be. But I'm done. I drove home and sat in the driveway for 20 minutes before I went inside. My daughter was at her desk with headphones on. She pulled one side off when I knocked on her doorframe. How was the work thing? Done, I said. She studied my face with the perceptive attention she's always had. You okay, Dad? I will be, I said. I promise. She nodded slowly, not entirely convinced, but willing to let me have it for the night. I made tea and sat at the kitchen table alone. My wife came home an hour later. We didn't speak. I slept in the guest room, and I slept better than I had in weeks. The conversation with my daughter happened that Sunday in the backyard, while we cut back the garden for winter together. I told her in plain language, without blame and without detail she didn't need. Her mother and I were going to separate. We both loved her. Nothing happening was about her or because of her. She was quiet for a while, cutting back the dead stalks of the late-season asters with clean, methodical snips. Is it because of something she did? She asked, finally. Adults make choices, I said. Some of them are wrong choices. She thought about this. Are you angry at her? Yes. She seemed to appreciate the honesty. Are you going to be okay? That question hit me the way it always hits a parent. Sideways, right through the ribs. Your child asking after you. 12 years old and already trying to carry something. Yes, I said. We're both going to be okay. I'm going to make sure of that. She leaned her head against my shoulder for a moment, out there in the garden, with the November clouds coming in low, over the Willamette Hills. Then she straightened up and went back to cutting. And I went back to cutting, and we worked side by side until the light went. 8 months later, I'm sitting in my office looking out at the city I've built pieces of for most of my adult life. The divorce was finalized 6 weeks ago. My daughter is with me 4 nights a week. And she is, by any honest measure, handling it better than I am, with the particular resilience of children who are given honesty and stability, even when everything else is uncertain. Blaine's firm did not receive the performing arts contract. The IP matter moved quickly once the metadata evidence was filed, and his proposal was disqualified by the committee. His attorney and mine are still in discussion about the civil component, but I've been told the outcome is not in serious doubt. Aldgate Design was awarded the contract 11 weeks ago. I stood in the conference room when the call came in and looked at my team. 6 people, who had worked 80-hour weeks on this for nearly a year, and felt something I can only describe as clean. Not triumphant, just clean. Like a room after you've finally cleared out everything that didn't belong there. Celia Oakes found a position at a firm in Seattle 3 months after everything came out. She sent me a brief email to let me know. I replied and thanked her. She wrote back 2 sentences. You would have figured it out eventually. I just shortened the timeline. She was probably right. I haven't started dating again. I'm not there yet. There are good days and harder days, and I've learned to stop trying to predict which will be which. What I spend my energy on instead is simpler. Showing up for my daughter consistently enough that she knows the ground under her hasn't shifted, even if the shape of our family has. She asked me last weekend, out of nowhere, what the Performing Arts Center was going to look like when it was finished. I pulled up the renderings on my laptop, and she sat beside me at the kitchen table, her chin in her hand, looking at the drawings for a long time. It looks like it belongs there, she said. That's exactly what we were going for, I said. She looked at me instead of the screen. You made something good, Dad. I looked at the drawings. The north wing corridor, the way afternoon light would fall through the atrium in winter. The acoustic walls that had once been someone else's stolen idea and were now, undeniably, ours. Yeah, I said. I think we did. Some losses clear the ground. You don't understand that until you see what starts growing in the space they leave behind.